birthdays, 123, and deep dive into the collaboration between birthday Eleanor Roosevelt and civil rights icon Mary King. Yeah. You know, we have a pair of cases, the story of a queer tracking two women, one black, one white, working on opposite sides of the law to bring down 1930 mobster Luke Channel. This is so exciting, you guys, but I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to this dynamic duo right now who just have the late silver. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for that unbelievable event. There's nothing I like more to see than this partnership between independent bookstores and libraries. It's like a match made in heaven because bookish people are the best people. Yeah, it's true. Well, I'm very glad I'm just going to adjust something over here. I'm pretending that I'm tech savvy, but I'm not. So just kind of work with me in terms. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. And you are.
Oh, I'm just trying to keep it married.
I'm so alive. You all think that I do not know the Deltas by now. You would be very, very wrong.
You know what it is. I not only am I Soros here,
Yeah.
they are always here.
You guys are the most wonderfully supportive group of people.
Columbus and then Pittsburgh. But you know, you got a chance to meet my best friend.
I did.
Over
6
like almost 60 years. That's like scary.
Oh, no. You have to be graceful together. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And then my niece is here. So that's why I'm happy. That's why I have that welcome.
All right. Okay. I'm just joking. I'm not second fiddle. And I'm good with that. Well, first of all, thank you for such an incredible welcome, incredible bookstore, incredible library, incredible readers. We've been very, very fortunate. And normally I was starting to tell you what the Parabasis is about, but my thunder has been stolen. It is the incredible, we think, incredible story of it's inspired by two very real historical women who worked on opposite sides of the law. One black, one white, in case you have noticed, we're black and white. I know you could overlook that previously, but we are, and that's kind of our jam, we're right about that. And these two women worked together in 1930s New York City to bring down the most fearsome monster.
And one of these women, her name was Eunice Carter. And Eunice Carter was the very first black female prosecutor in New York in the 1930s. Like, that's crazy. And she became part of Thomas Dewey's elite prosecution team. And his job was to get rid of organized crime in New York because they had like a death grip on the city. So he was a special prosecutor. She was a part of his team, and she was the one that built the groundbreaking case to bring him down. But she did not do it alone.
Eunice found an unlikely ally in Polly Adler, a Jewish immigrant from Russia who rose up against all odds to become the country's most famous madam. We told you Ray Rob said together, these women risked everything to challenge organized crime at the highest level.
So, but before we get into the story, we really wanted to tell you a little bit about our collaborations and why we do this. You already know that we are the authors of two other books. A little one you may have heard of, The Personal Librarian, and then The First Ladies. And so what we try to do with each of our books is to explore issues of race between a black woman and a white woman, and we're always looking for historical figures.
And so the sort of impetus for this story, and really for our ongoing collaboration, really began when we were on the road touring for these two books. In particular, the first one, Librarian. When we were out on the road, there's a couple little examples. Who knows, you yourself might be in some of these pictures one day. When we were on the road touring, it became clear pretty soon after we started that readers were as interested in us, our friendship, our working relationship, our hard conversations that we have about all things race. They were as interested in us as the women that we wrote about. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with our heroines that we wrote about. Belda Costa-Green, J.P. Morgan's private librarian, and I'm sure you've heard of Eleanor Roosevelt and the two BFFs who sort of are at the heart of the First Ladies. We are not as interesting as those women. So this was perplexing for us at first, when people were really curious about us and our friendship. But it became clear that people were moved by and hungering for those types of relationships, for those types of conversations, for examples of what that could look like. And it was really those sorts of interactions, exchanges, that really propelled us to write more. So really, it's all of you. That's the reason why we're here today. So we just want to take a minute to say thank you. I don't think you guys realize what a synergistic role you play in that ongoing collaborations that we undertake. So thank you.
And so with each book, we try to take on a different perspective with the reader. So, for example, with the first librarian, it was just one woman, and then we moved into two women with the first ladies, and they were best friends. But this time, we wanted to see what would happen if you took two women from totally different worlds. Like one is from one side of the globe, the other one from the other side of the globe. Of course, black and white, different backgrounds. What would happen if those two women had to come together for a common goal? Could they cross the great divide, especially the great divide of race? So, Marie, do you want to tell everyone, how did we find you as a colleague?
Well, Victoria likes to call me the
treasure hunter. She's the treasure hunter of this partnership.
I love nothing more than to go down into the rabbit hole of research. I have been a history nerd since middle school. I am proud about that. I went to college thinking I would become a history professor or a historian, and then I got bored with about the law, which you can ask me about that later. And that's one of my happy places. And I've been doing books like this for quite a while now, and I've assembled a list over time of these incredible women, right? Because often when you're down in these rabbit holes researching one woman, you're going to find other incredible women. Because I think, just looking around here, I think we all know that women travel. Especially the ones who are doing incredible things, right? So, to be honest, Eunice Carter had been on that list, right? I was a commercial litigator in New York City for over a decade, and I had heard of Eunice Carter. But to be frank, I really, I was a disgruntled New York City lawyer. I did not want to return to the world of litigation and courtroom procedures and witness interviews and document review. And that was all kind of like flashbacks to my years sleeping under my desk for many nights in a row. I just didn't want to return to it. But I did take another look at Eunice and delved into her history a little bit more, and I was amazed. I mean, I knew she'd risen up to become the first Black female prosecutor in New York, which Victoria mentioned, in an era of segregation, which we sometimes forget was going on, even in the North. And I knew how, to some extent, how unbelievably hard that would have been. When I entered the legal profession several decades ago, not years, I'm way older than that, there weren't as many women as there are today. There were more in the ranks, certainly than when news were there, right? But there were very few women in positions of power, in partnership roles, in leadership roles. And then I couldn't possibly imagine what it would be like to be a Black woman, the only Black woman in that situation. And the more I looked, and the more I discussed Eunice with Victoria, the more it seemed like she might be one half of our unlikely pair.
So what was Eunice Carter?
Well, I'm sorry. I just have to say, one aside, sorry to interrupt. In addition to terrible research, we also do fun research.
Let's do that.
We do do some fun research.
Yeah, we do fun research, and this was a lot of fun because we had to go to places where mobsters and everybody used to hang out, all those speakeasies. So we had to go and, but somebody has to do it.
Yeah.
I can't believe you forgot that.
And that's the best part. Because usually it's like dusting off microfiche machines.
Yeah,
You know,
that too.
it's not very clever.
That is it.
This is our better moments.
That's right.
Sorry.
So, but that's okay. Who was Eunice Carter? Eunice Carter was the daughter of two activists, Addie and Alpesis Hunton. And the next slide that you there is her mother, Addie. Her mother deserves her own novel. I'm not kidding. Because not only was she a racial and gender activist, but think about this. At the beginning of the NAACP in 1909, she worked for them. And she would go to the deepest parts of the South and open up NAACP branch offices.
Wow.
Like, that was crazy work. And here's the thing that was even more interesting about it. They would say things to the NAACP like, don't come to Memphis. Don't do that. And she would say, when can I get a train ticket to Memphis? And so that's one of the things that she did. She and her husband moved to Atlanta, and they were raising their two children, their two young children, Eunice and her brother. But in 1906, there were the Atlanta riots. And many of us know about Tulsa, we know about Rosewood. Atlanta was some of the worst riots, where over a couple of days, they just snatched Black people out of their homes, off the streets, wherever, and dozens were murdered. And it was an interesting time because Addie and her husband decided this is not where we want to raise our children. We cannot raise them in the South with this going on. So they sent Eunice and her brother to New York to live with friends of theirs. But the thing was, they were friends of the parents. The children didn't know them. And that became a pattern in their life where they were often sent to live with people while their parents were trying to save the world. And it's an interesting situation because who's going to save the children? But even though Eunice was away from her parents and her family, she still thrived. And after high school, she ended up going to Smith College. Any Smith College graduates in here? Oh, this is the first time we have done that one. And you'd be very proud. Well, she was the very first graduate of Smith, not a Black graduate. She was the very first graduate of Smith who graduated in 4 years with both a bachelor's and a master's.
Wow.
She had a bachelor's in social work and a master's in social work. And once she graduated, she ended up going back to New York and she moved to Harlem, where she set up these offices, dental offices for children who were not able to have dental care. And she had to interview different dentists, and one day, in walked this suave, good-looking man from Barbados. And so, he had that accent, and he was one of the most successful dentists in the city. And I didn't say Black dentist. He was one of the most successful dentists. So when you have all of that, what do you think happened between the two of them? They ended up marrying, and she married Lyle Carter, and they became part of Harlem's high social class. This is the building where they lived, 409 Edgecombe, which is a historical building. It's still there today. and you can go and see it. It used to be called the House of Celebrities because every black celebrity lived there, from W.E.B. Du Bois all the way through to Thurgood Marshall many years later.
Wow.
And all Eunice was expected to do was to be a Harlem socialite. But she wasn't interested in that. You know, she was the first of everything, right? So she had to go do another first thing. She went to law school, and she became the first black female graduate of Fordham University.
Oh, wow.
But when she graduated, surprise, surprise, she could not get a job in a law firm. I mean, of course not. So she worked in private practice for a little while. But then what became interesting was she was hired to become one of Thomas Dewey's special prosecutors. This is his blonde shot up there.
Looks like he's posting her next.
So Thomas Dewey was asked by the governor of New York to come in and clean up crime. Like, let's get it off the street, prosecute, get these monsters out of New York. And so he came in there and he built a team. And he hired 20 prosecutors to work with him. 19 white men and Eunice Carter. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. And so they went to work. And they worked in another famous building that's still there, the Woolworth Building, which was the tallest building in the world at that point. And so Eunice was in there with all of these men working to bring down the mob, and the men were given rackets that they had to work in, whether it was retail or construction or baking, the bakery racket, that was really a thing. But what Eunice was asked to do was answer the telephone.
Oh, shoot.
And then, okay, so it was a little bit better than that. Really, when Thomas Dewey was assigned to this position, he got on the radio and he said to all of the Harlem residents, or actually all through New York, if you have any complaints about the mob, any crime you see, anything you see, call us, come into the office, send us letters, and we will have someone to take all of the citizens' complaints. And they had someone. And it was Eunice who sat there all day answering the calls, reading the letters, doing the interviews when people came into the office. And what was interesting was while she was doing this, all of the other prosecutors were going after the top mobster in New York at the time, Dutch Schultz. And they were going after him because he had made a fortune in bootlegging and gambling and running the numbers. And he heard about Thomas Dewey's prosecution team. And he was like, this is not going to work for me. Because if they do an investigation, I could end up in prison. And he's like, this is not going, no, we can't do this. So the mob has rules. You know, you can't just kill someone. You have to go before the commission.
Especially as a prosecutor.
Yes, yeah, you can't just kill a prosecutor. You have to go before the commission, and it was the National Commission that was in charge of the mob. Very well organized. And so he went before the commission and says, I want to take out Thomas Dewey. And the commission says no, because that's going to just draw more attention to us. We got to ride this out. And so he leaves, and he's like, I'm not riding out nothing. And so he puts together a plan to assassinate Thomas Dewey. When the commission heard about that, they put together a plan, and they assassinated Dutch Schultz. And that's where our story begins.
So, yes, the murder of one of the fearsome mobsters in New York City was probably celebrated in some quarters. So I'm not going to lie about that. There were plenty of people happy to see this person who had, run so many rackets and had so much violence on so many people. They were happy to see him go. But the news was not exactly received favorably in Thomas Dewey's offices and with most, not all, of his assistant district attorneys. Most of these cases that they had been building against Dutch Schultz were these complicated evidentiary trails that led to one person, that led to Dutch, right? Trains of evidence that would link him to all these really horrific acts in all these different brackets, whether it's bootlegging, whether it's loan sharking, whether it's baked goods, as ridiculous as that sounds. And so when he was killed, they were kind of in a crisis at the office because suddenly all of their cases were upended. They had to come up with a new target and new evidentiary chains, and that was not easy to do. They decided on, because it wasn't going to be clear that one person was going to take over Dutch's brackets, they decided on going after somebody else who was really crucial in the city, another big monster. And that was this person, Lucky Luciano.
It looks like.
Had anybody heard of Lucky Luciano before you came here today?
Oh, yeah.
Lots of you. So he's, I think, one of the most famous gangsters of that time. Just a fun fact about Lucky. You know, he had been involved for decades, ever since he was really a young boy, really, in all sorts of crime, and kind of worked his way up the chain. At one point, he had got into an altercation with one of his colleagues, like many of us do in the workplace. And instead of hashing it out in a conference room, his colleague got out a knife and sliced him from ear to ear, and left him to bleed out on the floor. Because that's what you do with your colleagues, right? You guys the crazy thing is, he didn't bleed out. Like, who survives an injury like that? And that's how he got his nickname. The Lucky One. And he wore that scar like a badge of honor of his sort of inability to fail, right? So everyone else in the office is scrambling to reveal new cases, but not Eunice Carter. Why? Well, as Victoria pointed out, she's mostly been handling citizen complaints, right? She's had a parade of, citizens in her office, telephone calls, letters, but she's noticing something. The bulk of the complaints that she's receiving are about prostitution. There's a rise in prostitution in all of the neighborhoods across the city. And it seems to be organized. She's seeing patterns. And she's reminded of something that she noticed during her days working in women's court, right? In women's court, well, first of all, let's talk about what is women's court, because I was a lawyer in New York for a really long time, and I never heard of women's court. Well, in fact, it was a special court for women's crimes like prostitution, because you guys know there are no men involved.
Only prosecuted women.
Right, just women, or women's issues like custody, because no man was involved.
There's no man involved in custody issues.
I mean, people ask me about the most surprising thing I found in my research, the very fact that a woman's court existed and that some of these crimes and issues were considered specifically related to women and not men seemed crazy to me. And yet it was a law in Europe. Thankfully gone, but still it was out there for a long time. But anyway, I digress. That was one of my little diatribes. Eunice worked in women's court for a while. During that time period, when she was trying to build up a private practice, that was very difficult to do. She worked in women's court. And when she was there, she also noticed a pattern. When certain girls, and we're going to use the word girls for the prostitutes, because that's what they call themselves, the girls. The girls who came in, who were arrested and brought into court, who had a particular bail on and a very specific lawyer, were always released. Exactly, right? It's not a coincidence. And Eunice is examining the documents and going back, looking over the information she's gathered from citizens, looking back on the patterns she's noticed when she was on women's court, and she's starting to wonder what if this is organized, right? Of course, she raises the issue to Dewey. This could be a potential case. I mean, nobody else has a case ready to go. I can make this happen. Thomas Dewey didn't want to bother with a petty woman's crime like prostitution. Not to mention, did the mob really get involved in that? I mean, that's kind of like, low down, right? For the mob? Come on. I mean, okay. So, but Eunice isn't going to take no for an answer. She sure didn't get where she was by taking no for an answer. And she kept at it. She kept researching. She kept trying to understand the secret workings of prostitution, the extent to which the mob and Lucky's tentacles were wrapped around it. And the more I looked at the evidence for James, right? The more, just based on my own experience as a lawyer, like, to come to the understanding of things that she did early on in order to convince Dewey, she would have had to have inside information, I think, right? And so the question arose, who was her person on the inside? Now, not in any way, shape, or form does this diminish Eunice's brilliance, right? She saw something where no one else saw it. And she was brave enough to go after it when everyone else was timid and dismissive. So what if the person who helped Eunice on the opposite side of the law is somebody who shared her desire to bring down the men who were exploiting women? What if it's a person who had to overcome her own hurdles and prejudices? What if it's a person who would never be Eunice's friend, but maybe could be her comrade in arms against the mob, right? Did we have the other half of our unlikely pair? Well, we decided that we did, right? We decided that we did. That person, I'm sure by now you know, is Polly Adler, right? As you heard earlier, she really became the most famous madam of her age. But who was she? You guys can hear a little bit, or a lot, about who Eunice Carter was. Who was Polly Adler? Well, she wasn't born Polly to start. She was born a girl. She was born in a rural, rather impoverished area of Russia at a time when anti-Semitism was rampant. Pogroms were spread across her region of Russia, and many, many people in her area emigrated to try and get away from violence. But Polly didn't want to leave. Polly, at the age of 11 or going on 12, she had been awarded a prestigious scholarship to an institute of higher education, one that had never been awarded to a girl before, and had rarely been awarded to a Jewish person before. And she wanted to stay. She wanted to take it. She's very, very bright. She wanted to take advantage of this opportunity and live a life that was different from the one that her parents had. But her father had other plans for her. He decided that she would immigrate to America alone at the age of 12, even though she spoke not a word of English. Her job would be to move there, make money, send money back to the family, so one by one, other family members could come along. But she was 12, right? And this is a practice that's it's a pretty common practice in immigrant families around this time in the early 1900s. But I mean, you didn't see a lot of girls coming over to talk, right? And she didn't have anyone she needed to stay with. She didn't give names of distant family members and family friends. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to continue her education, but she was told that she had to work because she had to contribute to the households that she lived in, and she had to send money home to her family. She did end up working at a factory, a uniform factory, but just as she got a promotion and started to make more money, the foreman of the factory raped her. The family that she was staying with learned about this, right? And instead of feeling sympathy or feeling like retribution might have been should be exacted on this foreman, they threw her out on the streets. And they spread the word. So she became unhireable during the Depression.
Oh,
And she had no choice but to work on the streets herself. She, for a short time, she became a prostitute, but she was determined that she would not be a victim in the only realm that was left for her, the only area she was going to be permitted to operate. And so she decides she slowly builds up and becomes a small-time administration, if you will. Over time, she builds a house that is unlike anything that has been built before. She had 2 floors in an apartment building. This is the apartment building, it's still there.
And if you go and talk to the doorman, he goes all stories.
It's amazing, passed down all history of the decades.
great.
They had 2 stores, she has 2 stores in this building. And it's a beautiful apartment building on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. It had a secret entrance, because she couldn't risk people having the cops or anybody see where people were entering. The first floor was designed more like a speakeasy or a private club. She hired a Broadway set designer to create this enormous bar on the first floor that looked like the interior of King Tut's tomb. Tut was all the rage at this time, right? There was a poker parlor, there was a mahjong parlor, and then there was a grand central staircase. Upstairs, of course, was the entertainment, right? But yeah, not really came to Polly's for that. It was the place to see and be seen in the city. Celebrities, politicians, Broadway stars, gangsters were all there, kind of elbow to elbow at the bar. Everybody wanted to go to Polly's. And in fact, this was her calling card. It's a little blurry, so I'm not sure if you can see it. But her calling card just had 2 things on it. A parrot, because Polly crackers, Polly, that was her symbol, and her phone number, because she couldn't risk the cops finding out where she was located. Now, Polly paid off a lot of cops, right? But not every cop, right? So she had to keep some things close. In this house, Polly reinvents herself and really builds up a business to not only survive and thrive in a world that was really stacked against her. In Polly, we really see a different kind of female power, one born out of desperation and oppression, certainly one that still exploited women in some ways, but I will say that the most important thing, most different thing about Polly's house was the way she treated her girls. Having been on the streets, having been the victim of violence, having been abused by the men in the system, she protected her girls more than any other house. They had the best security, they had the best protection, they had medical care. That was really one of her main priorities. So yes, it was a business, and yes, it was a successful one, but her girls were her family. Still, you can never forget why she was there in her house, right? With her success came infamy, right? And arrests. Polly was famous. She was a celebrity in her own right. She was always, the reporters and the press were always trying to send pictures of her. She was always being picked up by the not paid off of cops. But she was really, even though she was arrested, even though she's kind of stopped pressure on this, she managed to stay out of jail until right around the time that she met Eunice.
And so Polly has this wonderful house where she has taken care of the girls. She's the most successful madam in the country. That's crazy to me. But the mom decided that they wanted a piece of that action. They wanted a piece of that prostitution action, and Polly wasn't having it because her whole house would come tumbling down. So she decided the only way to protect her girls, the only way to protect her business, was to begin to work with Eunice Carter. And this was, remember, the 1930s. So, and even though they were in New York is often called the Jim Crow of the North during that time. And so it was difficult for Black women and white women, or Black people and white people at any point, to get together to even go out to dinner because of segregation. And so they had to be very creative in how they would meet, because not only that, the mom was watching too. It wasn't like they could just sit together and just chat. So they began to find very interesting places to meet. And one of the places, if you're from New York or part of the East Coast, have you ever heard of Chapel?
Well, oh, yeah.
That diner, that was one of the only places that would serve Black people in the 1930s. So they would meet there. Now, they wouldn't sit across the booth from each other. They would sit at one end of the counter, the other end of the counter, and then try to talk and pass information. Isn't that crazy? Then they would meet at other places. Sometimes they would do it in plain sight. This is the ladies' pavilion in Central Park. Again, still there. And it gave them a chance to just be strolling around Central Park and just happen to be in the same place, and they could exchange information. And so from there, they were starting to build a case. The evidence that Eunice already had, the information that Polly gave to her, they were able to come together and build this groundbreaking case. But one thing I want you to know, this was the mom. It was dangerous every single time. Not only they walked out of their house, but definitely when they met together.
Despite all that danger, together, behind the scenes, Polly and Eunice accessed an army of women to help them provide evidence. Right? I mean, we won't tell you exactly who, but the array of women from all different walks of life, all different ages, some people you'd expect, some people you definitely wouldn't, who were fearless when they should have been fearful, going into a courtroom and testifying against the mob. It was the women who brought down Lucky, who emboldened not Lucky Thomas to actually bring the case in the first place, present it at the New York County Supreme Court, 62nd Street. This is where the trial took place. It is still there today. It's a place that I was a lot. This was a little bit of a full circle moment for me to kind of revisit those courtrooms in a different way this time. You probably won't be surprised, I'm sad to say, that even though Eunice came up with this whole case, right, the theory of the case, she established these chains of evidence and convinced Thomas Dewey to bring it in the first place. She was not asked to be a trial attorney.
Shocking.
Right? Instead, he brought some of his favorite cohorts up there with him to sit at the trial attorney table, and Eunice and Polly were left in the shadows. Now, to be fair, Polly wanted to be in the shadows. Polly could not risk any type of limelight coming on her. That would be the end for Polly. But we hope that they were at least content with the knowledge that they had worked together to really eradicate some, not all, of the mob's evils. You know, on the surface, Polly and Eunice look so different, right? I mean, the obvious, one's black, one's white. One operates inside the law, one operates definitely outside the law. She doesn't really believe in laws, to be honest. One is fighting for justice in the courtroom, and one kind of has her own brand of justice that she's trying to effectuate outside the courtroom for her girls. But really beneath that surface, there are so many similarities between these two women. They both have been overlooked and dismissed and underestimated. They both had to survive in a world controlled by men, and they both had to fight to be respected. They both had this desire to succeed and do more in the world, and they both, they basically both had been a little bit abandoned by their parents, right? And they had to be strong for themselves, and they were strong for these women, too.
So Appearances, this is the story of two unlikely partners. So like you said, I didn't tell her you left that photo in there. I told her to take it out. It's the narrative. But this is the story of two unlikely partners who really worked together to bring down mom. They brought down Lucky Luciano. He ended up going to prison for 50 years. And these two women did it together. But this story also allowed us to explore a different aspect of the relationships that we've been writing about. And especially like the first ladies, those were two women who were best friends. These two women, not only were they so different, but they barely liked each other. I mean, liking is not the word I would use. They were not enemies, they were not enemies, but they were not friends. But we wanted to show how people with different backgrounds and everything about them being different, we wanted to give everybody the opportunity to consider what is it like for people like that to come together for a common goal? What is it like for people to come together and fight for the same thing? And that's a question that was as timely then as it is now. And when we began putting this story together, the theme for us was always the same. I'm not sure we always want to write with a message because we want everyone to get their own message, but this book, we really wanted everybody to consider one thing, and that is you do not have to be friends to be allies.
It's true.
Thank you.
Goodness.
So now I hope we're going to our favorite time, which is question time.
Yeah, this is our favorite.
This is our favorite, I think I told you guys how much readers mean to us, how much your questions, your reactions, your thoughts really mean to our process and
It impacts our story. It impacts our story.
so this is our favorite part. Also, we do listen to you talk a lot. So
We got together for 10 days on a different city every day. So, but I want to questions. Can I say one thing? Because I said something about Delta. I said something about my best friend. I said my niece. The woman who started my career is here. Emma Rogers. Almost 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, I had written this little book, self-published this little tiny book. And I went to Arkansas, and I was walking in the store, just because it's a bookstore, I can't pass it. And I think Ronnie had read the book, but I think maybe 100 people had read the book. And I walked into this bookstore and they had 4 copies of my novel. I was like, wait, what? I knew you didn't want it. And I said, how did you hear about me? He said, there were Ronnie's calling all bookstores and telling them they have to order your book. And from there, my sales shot up. And it was the first time I was nominated for an NAACP Image Award. That book put me on the map, and that week. All right.
Bill Cosby, Jesse, Redmond Foster, and now these two Carter. So how did you write the book? Who took what part? And what
It's a great question. I would just say thank you, because you bringing Victoria along the ride allowed me to meet her and work with her. And this has been a transformative friendship and partnership, selfishly for me as a person. So thank you so much.
So you want to start because it begins with the research. So I said that Marie is the treasure hunter, and she has like this long list of women, black and white women that she wants to bring out the vault of history. And so she decided, goes down the rabbit hole, and she's starting to look at the women, and we start talking about them and stories. And once we decided on who we were going to do, we start with an outline, and we discuss every word of the book. One of the things that I'm most proud of is every book we've written totally together. Every word of every book we've written together. And so once we do an outline, discuss like 5 or 6 chapters at a time, and then I said, okay, I'll take that chapter, and then Marie will take one chapter, and we write just the first draft. And then once we write the chapter, we switch. And then we switch like 4, 5, 6, 7 times, seriously, writing the whole book. With First Ladies, at one point, I wanted to do the first draft of Eleanor Roosevelt, even though we had done the outline together.
I have to say, I think that maybe I love Mary a little bit more. I love Eleanor a little bit more. I just love Mary Bethune so much. I felt very protective of her. But it wasn't the right thing.
It wasn't the right thing to do because there were little nuances that happen with race sometimes, like in their races. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, yeah. So in the paragraph, so to Victoria's point, you know, we each then decide on character, and then we do that. That's our initial draft, right? We do that voice, that, and then we switch to the.
But even the chapters that we write, we discuss. Like, I'm going to write a chapter that we haven't both discussed.
So, you know, that's kind of the initial stage. And, you know you've made the right choice when you're in these scenes. And there are things that, had I been writing the Black character, I would never even think of, right? Because the lens, even though I'm trying to look at the lens, I'm trying to look at the world through the lens of a Black woman, how I can't. And that's why, you know, even with the personal librarian, you know, that's the story that I found a long time ago when I learned that she was a Black woman. I knew she deserved to have a Black woman tell the story. Because I can't imagine what it's like to be a Black woman in this country. I can't. So a great example of that, I think, there are things that have been lost in the storytelling. I've actually flipped it. There's a scene where Eunice is going to meet Polly kind of suddenly. She has new information. And she's leaving her office and she kind of has to sneak around. And if I had been writing this scene, I would have had Eunice just go on the street corner and put her hands in her cat.
In 1930.
I wouldn't even know how ridiculous that was. Right? So
Still be standing in the And so we talked about, I think I must have called Marie and said, I gotta figure out how Eunice is gonna get something. And she was like, well, put her in the
I love this reaction so much. This is like 150,000% proof that we did that.
Okay, so here's another one. So in the First Ladies, we decided very early that Mary Bethune was not going to be called Dr. Bethune because she did not want to be called Dr. Bethune. It was an honorary degree, and she felt doctor was reserved for the women who had earned it.
Right.
So we made a point of putting that in the book very early, and we discussed it and the reasons why. So later on in the book, there's a scene where a not so nice white gentleman calls her up and
I'm
says,
going to call him a gentleman.
okay, but he calls her up and he says, hey Mary, and she says, Dr. So Marie called me and said, didn't we decide that she's not going to say Dr. And I said, listen girl. I said, every Black woman is going to stand up and applaud when they read that sign because there's so many of us who say, don't call me doctor, but when you. So what was so fascinating though, I just did a whole thing about it. What was fascinating though was when I tell that story, a white woman stood up and died and says, Marie, all white women didn't like that too. So there are little nuances that we all, when we discover them, we have great racial conversations.
And really, it's sometimes for me as a person, I mentioned that, you know, our relationship has been transformative to me. It's a new lens through which I look at the world, right? And I hope that readers who aren't familiar with that lens can start to maybe see things a little
Yeah.
It's gonna be quiet on the corner.
There's Eunice. Look at you.
You guys need to do a picture like that. Put it on the phone.
Hi, thank you so much for being with us. I'm such a bad girl. I wonder, when you were researching these two ladies, Betsy gave you pause, did you find anything shocking? And source material, did you find journals, or how did you research their personality?
Yeah, so we both had different source material. For Eunice, there is a biography written about her called Invisible, right? Written by her grandson, Stephen L. Hart. Do you know that name? He wrote The Emperor of Ocean Park, and he's a Yale professor.
He's amazing.
So I got a lot of information. Well, we both got a lot of information from there. And then I'll let Marie talk about her source material, but it was something that was shocking to me. And I kept talking to Marie about this. I thought I knew what prostitution was. I know. And I didn't know what organized prostitution was. I didn't realize the violence, and I didn't realize how they use drugs to keep women under control. I didn't realize that prostitutes ended up at the bottom of the Hudson River. I didn't, that was shocking to me.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
For probably, I would say the best research on there's a lot of interesting things about her, both, newspaper articles or letters or other people's accounts. She was famous. It's her own autobiography. When you have a historical character who's inspiring, who's a person who's inspiring your character, you are so excited when you find an autobiography because that's the person's story in their own words. What could be better? Except you have to remember that an autobiography, you take a grain of salt, is their spin on their own history, right? So you got to look at it carefully in certain ways. But I would have to say that autobiography not only gave incredible insights into all aspects of Polly's life, especially her upbringing, which hadn't been talked about widely elsewhere, but you get to hear their voice. Is whether or not every single thing in there is true or not, this person, that is how they do things. That's how they talk about things. That's how they think about things. That's what's captured on the page. And it's so, it really helps Polly's thoughts and voice kind of inhabit my thinking. Shocking things, I mean, there's many things, you ever read that autobiography, like some of the stuff that went on is just literally unbelievable. And it's amazing that somebody like her, this tiny little woman with a very thick accent, was able to rise up to the position of power that she had. I mean, only by her brilliance and tenacity was she able to do that. But I think for me, it's almost the most shocking thing, it's kind of interesting, Victoria's most shocking thing is something about prostitution. My most shocking thing is something about the law. And it's what I do about the women's courts. I just found that to be, of course, we know that there's been institutionalized prejudice and misogyny for racism. But it was really laid bare in that. The fact that, these crimes would only be considered attributable to women, right? It really gave a really strong glimpse into the prevailing attitudes at that time.
And we also had the child treasures. And so we knew the women who showed up and how they got there. And so that was kind of exciting, reading some of those things that really happened. And the things that the mom did to them, we know some of that. Okay, she's just.
Hi, I'm Sam. Thank you for following your calling. I know, I can understand how it may have been difficult at first to say, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to write, but you did it, and for me, it brought my family together, my circle of women together. We discussed your books, and we learn, but we also are entertained. So thank you for that. My question is, I'm thinking about your process, your writing process. Was there ever a time where you reached a challenge, something that felt insurmountable? And if you did, how did you overcome that in writing this book?
Am I being insurmountable in terms of?
Like a difficulty, like maybe there's a scene you really couldn't capture, or there's information that you may have not had, or.
Having other.
Yeah, it happened in the First Ladies, it happened quite a bit. Oh, yeah, yeah.
It does happen in other books, I would say, less so, I think, in this book, which was.
Yeah, I can't think of anything, and the, you know, in the First Ladies, there were times when I wanted to use bad racial words. And I knew my writing partner was not going to be happy with this. And I remember one weekend writing a scene and spending the whole weekend walking through my house. Okay, I mean, seriously, I knew. And then I kept calling her and saying, "No, you haven't seen that." She was like, "Oh no, I've been busy." And I was like, "You gotta read the scene." I don't want to tell her what to look for. But I knew that was going to be a little bit insurmountable with her. And she went along with it because she wanted to be authentic. But if Marie had been writing that book alone, she would have never put the word in there. And so that was one.
That was fun. I would say, now, it's not insurmountable, but it's, you know, a path not taken. In The Personal Librarian, there was a whole sort of little storyline that we had. I know we're not talking about this book, and I don't want to give any spoilers, but the character had the opportunity to be a mother in a particular way, and it was a storyline that we really liked. We really wanted to include it, and we wrote it. And at the end, we were like, you know what, I don't think that works, and we had to remove it because it really slowed the story down. It didn't serve the story, right? It was the part of life. We're not writing like pretty much very biographies here. These are one portion of a woman's life meant to kind of be emblematic of a particular theme or a particular understanding of how she came up to have this incredible legacy and be this amazing woman. So sometimes you can't include everything. And that can be harder because you learn so much more than you can ever include. So much more.
There's some young people.
Why don't you?
And up here too. Oh, so two there, and we have two here as well.
Hi, I'm Megan, and I'm excited to read your book. I have not read the book. I was introduced by my cousin, actually, and being here, I am so excited to delve into this. I want to hear because I'm ready to read these books. So my question is, did you interview anybody, and how do you approach interviewing them to get more information for your research?
Well, first of all, we only write about women who are no longer with us, right? Because if they're no longer with us, that means that they do not have any more chance to tell their own story. We would never want to take away from someone who's living this chance to tell their own story the way they want it to be told, right? So that's definitely not somebody you're going to do, right? Certainly there are sometimes, not often, people who are alive today who may have known the person, but we are writing a fictional story based on, inspired by a real person. So, you know, we may come across a time when somebody has information that we cannot get any other way, and so maybe we would invite the person. But that's more of a, I would say, a tactic you use for writing biography or nonfiction piece. But that would be a bridge we have to cross. Typically speaking, I would say, don't invite them into the process.
Yeah, we don't know how people who are still here, how they feel about it. Now, we've been blessed. We've had somebody from the Morgan family. We had Eleanor Roosevelt's granddaughter. So we've been really, I think the battery's out of this one, but I'm from New York. I don't know.
Really don't.
We had Eleanor Roosevelt's granddaughter come to us, so we would not go to them first.
Yeah. But we have been very fortunate. In fact, Eleanor Roosevelt's granddaughter told us that our depiction of Eleanor Roosevelt was the closest thing to her grandmother was really more than any other depiction in biography or fiction she's ever read.
And she invited us to speak. We spoke at the FGR library.
Hold it.
So definitely one of those like teaching models, and you know, like, is that our goal in our job is to honor the women in our fictional way, right? So to know that that family member felt that way too is so meaningful.
Yeah. Good job.
Hi guys. Hi there, guys. It's lit. I have read both books. I think the personal librarian started my historical fiction kind of journey and how it's opened up a lot of other historical fiction books and people that we know. So who else is next? Who's next? I mean, learning about these women really empowered me myself, to just know how brilliant and wonderful we are. And so hearing these stories now, especially at a time like this, has been very eye-opening.
Yeah.
And I just pray you continue to do it. And I love both of you guys together. I appreciate you saying, like, I can't tell the story because I don't know. And leaning on Victoria's, you know, and vice versa.
Yeah, vice versa, too.
Vice versa. So I just applaud that. And I'm just so excited to read this book and whatever's next.
Okay, so we have, yes, we have it, we're writing, we've already, got the publisher and our book together. And we have 2 solo books. I'm still writing mine. It's called The Sisters of Sag Harbor. And it's about the Black women who founded Sag Harbor. Because we don't have these historically Black beaches and nobody knows how they got there. And there are women who did amazing things to bring these beach communities to us, so I'm very excited about that. I'm in the process of writing it. I've been writing everywhere we go.
She's been really good.
On this tour, because she doesn't have to write, because her next solo book is done.
Well, let's take copy that, we all know what that means. Yes, so my next solo book comes out next March. It's called The Witch of Wall Street.
Okay.
And it's the story of, gosh, I haven't had to describe it yet really, but it's the story of Hetty Green, who was the first, she was a self-made tycoon in the Gilded Age. She had every bit as much money and power as like J.P. Morgan or Vanderbilt, but she chose a different path, and she chose to live and work and make choices that were more equitable. She believed in equality, that she gave money wildly, but didn't require her name to be on the side of the building. It seems a very, we are in a new. He's right there. We are in a second Gilded Age.
Yeah.
And she is a great example of what you can do and what not to do.
So we went to Morocco together. Last time I told this lady, we had just went from Morocco.
Oh, I heard it's a great trip.
It was really fun.
It's a 2-part.
Okay, so the first part is, if you and Polly were working together secretly, how did you guys find out that they, were working together, and did everybody else find out? Since Polly wants that to be in secret. And then the final thing is kind of what happened with the ladies. Did Polly continue to do her business? Did
Good question.
more cases?
Well, what I would say about what happened after, we can't tell you after. And I also would like to answer the other question the same way, because it's in the author's notes. Right?
Yeah, because we don't want to give too much away.
There's certain things.
But no, this is historical fiction, because we say every part that's historical, every part that's fiction, but I'm beginning to believe the fiction part.
What I would say is that I think both our minds, Polly Adler is the emblem of all the women who were in that army of women who helped provide evidence. In this book, she is the voice, our voice, for the voiceless women.
Yes.
So remember that as you read the book, and then you read after them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jean. How you doing? Doing great. Interviewed you not too long ago. Do you remember? Yeah, that's me. That's her. Yeah.
Hi.
In person.
Yeah. Now I forgot what I was going to say. No. You've both alluded to the fact that you write separately as well as together. How do you balance that? How do you say, why aren't you working on our book when, you know?
Why are you not saying this before?
I mean, you sound just like her. So I never have to say to her, why aren't you working on the book? Because Marie is an attorney by trade. So she believes in flow charts and, outlines. She believes in deadlines.
Oh.
To me, a deadline is a suggestion. And so we write in a shared document so she can see
Oh.
that she's on chapter 22 and I'm on chapter 3. And it's not because I'm not working on her, I'm slower, I have a different process. She believes in all that stuff,
Work starting?
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. I'm a deadline meter.
Oh my gosh.
What I would say is, it can be hard to juggle. I do write faster than Victoria. I do. That's just how we operate. So we have to work very hard. We do have to work with deadlines, like it or not, because we do each have our own solo projects, and we have to work those projects in and around the corporate projects. So it is managing and organizing a lot. It really is. A book takes a really long time. The research, the writing, the editing, there's the timeline, and it's not just you. We have a whole wonderful team. We have one of our amazing team members.
Lauren's back here.
And we have lots of people who help us and support us, and they're on deadlines too. So we have to always kind of look towards that aim in mind.
But she's like my sister. She really is. We're that close now. So we can say whatever we want to.
Like, please hurry.
And then when she says, I can ignore her. It just depends on the mood of the day. But we get it done. And she does keep me on track, very track, when I'm writing with her and when I'm writing my solo books. But writing with her is, easy is not a word with writing, but it's easy. It's easy.
Okay, we have another one over there, and then I think we have one more over here.
Yeah, she had been asking.
Okay, let me let her go, and
Yeah, well, I mean,
you're right.
so you,
Let me see. Okay, go.
so you kind of talked about this since I raised my hand, but, we recently saw an under-author who does historical fiction, and she said she picked somebody, she'd find a woman who had a story that nobody had ever heard of, but should have. And so you've got a list of interesting women. What, is there just one thing about it, or it's just that she's surprising, or she did something that nobody else did? Kind of what you
I have a very specific rubric, and it's what works for me. I don't know a lot of these books now. I'm looking for something very specific. I'm looking for a woman who has left a really important legacy that we are beholden to today, that has some tangible contribution in our modern day lives, but we don't know who she is. So if we know her name, we don't know that she's the one responsible for that, right? And I'm also looking for a woman who is dealing with issues that have both modern and historic elements, so that we as readers can relate to her story, can maybe extrapolate a little from her life and her experiences and say, that I understand that. Sometimes we need a little bit of the distance of history to have something resonate for us today. And so, you might find a strong, who's like absolutely a crazy existence, but if she hasn't left us something, and holes that I'm probably not going to include her. Sometimes you think someone's on there and I put her on the list and I'm like, she had too much fun.
And with me, it's very simple. And I don't even know if you're going to remember saying this, but when I wrote the personal librarian and Ronnie read it, she said, who knew? I'm looking for a woman who's going to make people say, because when I write my solo books, I am writing about Black women. I think that's so important at a time when you're trying to bury my history. Yeah, I'm going to bring it up. And so I'm always looking for the woman that when there's somebody saying, who knew?
And the other thing that she told us is never, ever spin the author's notes on books like this. All
There's so much.
I always want people, some of the best parts of the book are in the author's notes.
I always read them first.
That's all. Nice to meet you. Thanks for this third collaboration. Excellent, absolutely excellent. I've done my first read, I have to do another one. Victoria, you came in home for 4 books now. But I need to know, you mentioned the cameo with Jesse Ray McCloskey. Do they really know each other?
They really knew each other. I think they were closer, Jesse Benedict and Palmer Massey was closer to Eunice Carter than I even put in the book. Because Eunice Carter wanted to be writing this part that for me saying we couldn't include everything, and we did have this part in there, but we had to take it out because you're not going to read an 800-page book. But Eunice Carter at one point wanted to be a writer, so she was part of the Jesse's circle. Isn't that cool? But Marie said earlier at the beginning, these women travel in packs, like they're all successful women, and so they were very good friends.
Like we carry, track.
That's right. I'm sorry, she Jesse was married.
How cool. I love that. And then Maria, I just read Dawn of Egypt.
That book is excellent.
Yeah. How did you choose that character?
Yeah, Sophie, my most recent solo book came out in March. It's called Daughter of Egypt, and it's the story. Oh, it's over there. It's the story of the only female pharaoh, Hatshepsut, that had the most successful, one of the most successful reigns in all of ancient Egypt. And the woman, she was Lady Evelyn Carter. She was the daughter of the Lord of Highclere Castle, which was Downton Abbey. If you ever watched that show. And so it's really the real family that owned and still owns Downton Abbey today. It's the Highclere Castle Downton Abbey today. They were archaeologists. And she went with her father to excavate what she, in the 1920s, what she hoped was going to be Hatshepsut's tomb, and unearthed the story of this incredible real woman who, in the years after her reign ended, someone, I won't say who, went around and really eradicated every reference to her. Her name, her likeness, her temples, smithereens.
I won't say.
Oh, thank you.
It's so good. I mean, I've read so many of your books, obviously, and I think this, and I told you this, Daughter of Egypt is her best book.
Oh. Yeah, she was amazing. She was amazing. So both of them were amazing. So that's what that story's about.
So I think that wraps up the questions. Yes, yes. So we're going to have to, are you guys okay with taking a group photo?
Yeah, we love a group photo. But before we do that, can I say just one thing? First of all, thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I said it earlier. You guys can follow you've got targets up here, and we thank you. And we thank your libraries and the booksellers. We thank you. We're all in this together.
Coming out July 4th week. And then readers always ask me, and I'm sure that I said this when I was here for Harlem City, but readers always ask if there's anything that you can do to help us. And the greatest thing we have is word of mouth. That's how it raised school. And so when you enjoy a peer basis, would you mind just sharing it with 5 friends? Just telling 5 friends to.
I post them on Facebook.
Yeah, post it on Facebook and tell your book club.
Yeah, I do.
So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm so glad. Please, please, why don't you come and take this stuff? We're not going to be.